Jonathan Edwards has described his second collection, Jen, as a box full of voices you can open. They all come out, some shouting in your face, some whispering in your ear, some sulking or stuttering. He is a master of the character study, having established himself with his Costa Poetry Award winning first collection, My Family and Other Superheroes, where he created joyful folklore and legends around the people of the valleys of South Wales, where he's from. Edwards often talks about how, for him, writing is a method of time travel, a way to experience history firsthand. The parallel worlds he presents in both of his collections reinforces, for me, the importance and power of myths, which are, as Joseph Campbell says, always true, and sometimes really happen. Edwards has won many awards, such as the Cardiff International Poetry Competition for Evel Knievel Jumps Over My Family, the Basil Bunting Award for Gregory Peck and Sophia Loren in Crumlin for the filming of Arabesque, June 1965, and the Ledbury Poetry Festival International Competition for Servant Minding a Seat for His Master, which were a performance of The Rivals, Covent Garden Theatre, 1775. When someone can write poems that more than live up to titles like this, you know he's good. Jonathan Edwards.
Hiya, thanks so much for that wonderful introduction. I feel as though I only wrote those titles just to give James the challenge of reading them out to the literary partners. It's wonderful to be in Cork. That's not really a compliment to Cork, it's just because I come from Newport, so it's wonderful to be anywhere else. I'm going to start with a poem which is set in Park Street in Crosskeys. It's a little terrace street in the village that I live in, where my dad grew up, and there was a sweet shop at the end of the street. It was a house, really, which had been converted into a sweet shop by an old lady who put about 6 jars of sweets out and some weighing scales. And this was partly a kind of entrepreneurial startup business, but mostly to increase her chances of being a battle axe. My father buying sweets, 1956. So here he is, 11, a little bugger, with his neat curls, his comprehensive training to be my lookalike. His mother's voice chases him down the terrace as he swaggers to the music of the coins in his pocket. His school tie, flipped over his shoulder, is a silk scarf, sported by an artist strutting from one absinthe joint to another in 19th century Paris. Now he looks in the window of Mrs. Bullen's sweet shop. The reflection puts his face in a jar of chocolate toffees, grinning. Chimes announce him as he steps inside, the shop Mrs. Bullen's front room. Fearsome in pastels, she emerges, eyes him, places weights on one side of the scales, sweets on the other, offers him all she has of justice. A clatter into the till and he's out and walking home, a paper bag full in his palm. There are years in which the shop will go to bedsits, the bedsits to ruin. My father's mouth will bloom with fillings, but now his evening stretches deliciously ahead, and he pauses helpfully beneath the streetlight, so we can watch him lift one gleaming thing from the bag, unwrap it, raise it to his lips, so I can taste all the butter, cream, the sugar, here on the tip of my tongue. This next poem is about the same sort of thing. It's about someone walking through a terrace street and kind of having the sort of element of time travel about it that James mentioned. This one is about my uncle, who was a postman when he was a student, and he was a terrible postman, as the poem makes clear. Many years ago, this is about 10 years ago, many years ago, I went to Ledbury Poetry Festival and I showed this poem to a poet who's here at the festival, who I won't name because, but he gave me the most wonderful piece of advice on any poem that I've ever had. I showed him the poem and he read it, and he said, the poem's great, let's go and have a pint of Guinness. The most astute piece of advice I think you can ever give a poet. And I've replicated that in many tutorials since, you know. Sometimes I say to people, you know, the poem's really quite average, let's go and have a pint of Guinness. Poem's desperate, let's go and have a pint of Guinness. But always that second sentence remains, you know, as a basic thing. My uncle walks to work, 1962. He has a summer job as a postman, so races up at 6. In the living room, my gran is poking the fire, cursing my granddad who will die before I'm born. Out of the house and down the hill, past the Crown, sometimes repenting the night before. He rounds the corner by the block of flats, or would do, but it isn't there yet. Into the sorting office, knocked down when I was a kid. He shoulders his bag of mail and staggers back up the hill. Into his street, into his house, my gran still poking and cursing up the stairs. He drops the sack on the bedroom floor, careful not to wake my father, who has to get up for work in an hour, and goes back to bed. He'll do the delivery when he's properly rested. Let him sleep. He has much ahead of him. A bag of mail, a wife, 3 children, 5 and counting grandkids, and every year he buys me a hardback copy of the winner of the Booker Prize. It's quite a useful thing to say in a poem that someone buys you a copy of the Booker Prize winner every year, because once you've published it, they have to do it then for the rest of your life. I'm planning a future poem in which my uncle gives me a cheque for £1,000 every year. I'm going to read a couple of poems set in Newport. They feature famous people visiting Newport. The most important thing, the most frequent feature with famous people visiting Newport is pace. They tend to move through at high speed and they don't look back. And this is one of the visitors. This is Harry Houdini, the famous escapologist who came to Newport in 1905. And they put him in a straitjacket and they threw him off Newport Bridge into the water, and he dutifully reappeared a couple of minutes later. Nowadays, if we put someone in a straitjacket and throw them off Newport Bridge, it's just Saturday night out. When this happened, my grandfather was 15 years old, and he was an apprentice in a Valley's Butchers, and the poem imagines that he was there watching Harry Houdini jump. Harry Houdini on Newport Bridge. He stands 100 feet above a river that's popular with suicides and lovers. He stands there in the limelight and the weather, in padlocks, chains, a straitjacket, and his immaculate moustache. The whole town, gathered, watching, breathes in. He stands 100 feet above the river and leaps. Meanwhile, in the crowd, my grandfather is busy being 15. He's presently engaged in tying the shoelaces of a policeman to those of the vicar, lifting handkerchiefs from pockets to swap them with each other. Harry Houdini has been what? A minute underwater, and in the crowd, hands are being raised to mouths. A day off for my grandfather from the family village butchers. He looks up at the chains on the watches of his father, his grandfather. A minute and a half, a woman on the bank points towards the darkness in the river, slowly turning to a bobbing head, moustache, a waving hand, a cheer. The woman starts to cry. Her husband reaches for his handkerchief. A policeman pulls a vicar from his feet. This poem has a very similar strategy. It's about Kurt Cobain, the lead singer of Nirvana, who supposedly came to Newport in 1991 to a nightclub called TJ's, which was a spit and sawdust rock club where I spent a lot of my teenage years. And local legend has it, that he proposed to Courtney Love in TJ's in 1991. Whether or not this is true, Newport is clinging to it. And when this happened, I was 12 years old, so I didn't know who Kurt Cobain was yet. A couple of years later, I was completely obsessed. So it's about that. Kurt Cobain proposes to Courtney Love. Some young dude staggering from the station, all jeans and grimace, all tufty coat and peep-toe sneakers. That's nothing new around these parts. He rubs his eyes, approaches this first stranger. Excuse me, do you know the way to a place called TJ's? That voice he has. A mile away, Courtney Love is sound-checking, warming up. Rain comes down as he passes the ruined castle, crosses the bridge. Statistics say more than 30 people will jump from that year. Nevermind has been Billboard #1 for 6 weeks now. What exactly does a human being do with that much love? I am 4 miles away and 12 years old, and Kurt Cobain is walking through Newport, 3 years too early for me. At the door of TJ's, his nose-ringed biggest fan in the world just tells him the price, stamps his hand. Inside, his eyes accustom, and he spots her at the bar, back to the room, her mane, her little girl's dress. People are brought into being by moments like this. Kurt Cobain is crossing the room in TJ's. Newport is falling to his knees. The cold thaw through ripped jeans. The barman leaps across the counter to deal with some punter, and the bouncer, grinning, gets in the way as one girl punches another. Of course, there are those who say all this is folklore, legend, gossiped up by someone with a romantic imagination or a marketing background. I am 12 years old and dreaming in a room lined with posters of footballers, and on Newport Bridge, a couple are walking hand in hand, the man pausing now, perhaps, to light a cigarette. In that sudden spark, someone passing might almost glimpse his face, before he turns away, before he walks again into the dark. So being a poet is a bit like being a mastermind contestant. You've got to have a specialist subject. And over time, by trial and error, I've realised that my specialist subject is animals who don't do stuff. I was hoping that it might be animals who do stuff. That was really the intention. And I went to look at lots of animals in zoos, and what I discovered was they weren't doing stuff. So this is a poem about that. I went to see a hippo. I went to see a hippo in a zoo, and all day long the hippo lay beneath the line of water in its tank, and it would not come up and show me its face, despite the fact that the zoo flyer had a picture of a hippo's face on it. You know, under the Trade Descriptions Act, something should be going on with this hippo. The hippo is solo, hobo, incognito, 2 boulders curving out of Dettelmerk. In a zoo, his photo advertises, doing a sponsored sitting still all day. Stop being a cliche, hippo, or I won't write a poem about you. Then you'll be sorry. What is your body but the verb to wallow? What is the water but a part of self? Google says you can crush a Ford Sierra between your jaws. They don't say how they test this. Candy floss high boys crowd your glass, betting they could hold their breath underwater longer. They could leap from one boulder to the other. I abandon you for the giraffes, stupid as window cleaners. The lions, sunshine with teeth, but keep coming back. If you were to rise, show your eyes, your mouth, would you have Martin Sheen's mud-crazy face, breaking smoke water in Apocalypse Now? Closing time. One last go. Oh please, hippo, don't be so self-effacing, so tight-fisted. Come on out, don't you know we love you? Wait, is that a flash of flesh, a hippo peep show? Or are you still snoozing? A little girl says, Dad, that island's moving. This poem has a very similar strategy. It's about lions. It's the lions in Bristol Zoo. And I went there to try and get a poem about the lions, and the lions were not doing anything. I think these animals are getting a memo that I'm arriving. The lions were not doing anything, so there was no poem. They're very despondent. Driving home, when the lions began to speak to me in the voice of John Lennon, which is an interesting experience if you are driving over the Severn Bridge when this begins to happen. I was listening to the John Lennon song "I'm Only Sleeping," and the poem started happening in my head in the lion's voice. So this is Lions Asleep. So look, don't bother us. We're only sleeping, our arms around each other and our eyes tight closed. We drift, we doze. Here on the hearthside rugs our manes are, holding the hot water bottles of each other. We are dreaming. Do not disturb. Don't make us toss or turn. We're having 40 winks. Our bodies coiled or curled around each other, so it's never clear where I end, where he begins. This glass is thin. Don't bang. Don't knock. We're in the land of nods, so turn that flashlight off and tell your young, face painted for the day with our markings, roaring to be us, not to butt this window with their heads now, please. Asleep in bed is where we are. We know the Zoom app makes us cover stars, but jog on, please. Go see the seals. We'll show it all for sprats like strip club dollars thrown in their direction. Leave us here, beneath the covers of each other. As a treat, if you are very good, we'll make your day a little later. Get up, pace about a bit, or raise our heads, offer our pink yawns. But don't be fooled. Beneath these snores we think our thoughts, and death sleeps in these pores. I was reading something recently which gave advice on how to structure a poetry collection, because having done two other things, I felt like I needed to find out. And one thing they said was put your best poem first and your second best poem last. So by that definition, this is the second best poem in this book. This is a statement of commercial suicide, really, because if you don't like this poem, there is only one poem in this entire book any better than this one. Every other poem, except for one, is worse than the poem I'm about to read. I'm reading this for Margajata with thanks for the miracle of her being here. It's called Song. So come to me, by plane, by train, by car, by unicycle girl, by self-drive van, by Twitter, FaceTime, or by sleight of hand. Oh, lease yourself a pack mule, a giraffe. Oh, steal yourself a moped. Pay a man to carry you here, girl, on piggyback. Or get the railway to lay extra track up to my door, up to my waiting hands. So come to me, on fresh air or on credit. Oh, hoof it, leg it, go by Shanks's pony over stony ground. And live off grass or hedgerow, girl, whatever you can forage, and rest on riverbanks beneath a roof of forest. Navigate your way by stars or GPS, but listen, girl, be quick. Oh, speed yourself towards my waiting skin. So come to me. Oh, score yourself a gun, a false moustache girl, and a native tang, and smuggle yourself in the early hours and the wire and across the border. Or buy yourself a wrecked and promising motorhome, and let dawn find you, girl, with oil-stained cheeks just working till it purrs or goes. Or drive towards my waiting bones. So come, by raft, by hovercraft, Or do a goose-fat, nose-clipped, brave, or water-winged breaststroke through the sea that's parting me from you? Or fit a tractor engine to a lilo, rub a ring, a rowing boat? My home's made by these hands, this skin, these bones. My home is made of straw and fragile stars. Oh, come to me. Oh, make this where you are. I'm just gonna read one more poem. This is another poem. This is another poem about Newport. I feel as though just out of being a cultural ambassador for Newport, I should say that if you've never been to Newport, one of the most interesting things about Newport, or the thing that'll sum the place up, is that there's a place in the middle of Newport which is famous for as a place where you can go to fight people. If you're ever interested in this thing, if you're ever interested in beating someone up or just getting beaten up, there's a constant rolling fight there in the square in Newport, and which you can visit any time. And the council realised that, on the whole, this is probably a bad idea, really. Middle class dollar is what you've got to go for, and this might be keeping people away. But instead of flooding the place with police or community support officers or something like this, what they did was they placed a chain cafe on every corner of this square. So there's a Starbucks and a Coffee No. 1 and a Cafe Nero. And it did change things. People still go there to fight constantly, but now other people go to the cafes and sit and watch them. This is called Newport Talking. It's written in the voice of Newport, and it's what Newport has got to say for itself. So I'll just finish with this. Thank you so much to the Poetry Festival for having me, and thanks so much for being a brilliant audience. Newport Talking. Me, I get up early, see. I like to watch the sunrise over the transporter, to sneak, perhaps, one cheeky fag, to gently blow the smoke away. As the fog clears, the sun shines down on all these people. Really bloody busy is what the next hour is, changing all the traffic lights to go, helping school kids safely cross the road. And as for him who sits in his high ride and winds the window down, and offers some imaginative or foul-mouthed advice to her in the next lane, well, he can wait and wait. 2 hours of that, I like to stop for lunch in the high fields which no one thinks I have. Take in the view, the air, and share my buddies with the horses, all those gorgeous stinking bastards there, whose only speed is slowness, their tails Sunday fishing line dropped in the day, whose chewing is hypnosis. An hour of them is everything I need to set me up for my big afternoon around the shops. My lovely sticky-up paving stones paid for this shoplifter. A nudge, a wink, and this rain cloud is shifted from here above the head of this old lady who's forgotten her umbrella. Rush hour is a pain in my chest. The noise, the stress, the traffic flow, the fuel emissions up my nose. It's Friday night, and soon my streets are dance floors for these brill-creamed madmen, these blow-dry princesses, in all their giggling height of fashion. How I love to see them, how I tip the wink to skull-haired doormen, line up taxis, fling the doors of chippies wide open. How I make the most of every single moment, for I know full well how this will end. It's 4 a.m, and hours since I should have been in bed, but who will watch if I don't? Here, outside Debenhams, flat on his back, this bloke with his big arms wrapped tight around the air. I've seen him recrossing my bridges, staring too long down from there, to where the bubbling reflection of the stars is. Now I hover close to check his breath. He shuffles in his sleep, here in this doorway, here in the place exactly where my heart is.
Abigail Parry spent 7 years as a toymaker and is a former circus skills coach. After the 2008 hula hoop craze in Britain, she made enough money to pay for a master's in creative writing. After completing a PhD in gaming and playing in poetry, she invented the position of, and so became, poet in residence at the National Video Game Arcade in Nottingham. One of the many projects she worked on was an arcade-style shooter that contained hundreds of lines of 5 centuries of love poems. And the way you play the game determined the poem you get at the end. So, like an aggressive play style would get you a very passionate, forceful love poem, and like a slower, more strategic play style would get you like a more coy, sort of reserved poem. There are many ways to become a poet, many paths up the mountain, but this one just happens to be the coolest. She has received many prizes and awards for her work, including the Ballymaloe Prize, the Troubadour Prize, and an Eric Gregory Award. Her first collection, Jinx, published by Bloodaxe in 2018, was shortlisted for the Forward Prize for Best First Collection 2018, and is a book of gamers, gamblers, and tricksters. Individually, each poem is like the linguistic version of Close-Up Magic, with intricate soundscapes, and for me it evokes this childlike wonder and joy. And the content matches the form and the interplay between control and powerlessness, thematic tension heightened by the consistent beating rhythm of each poem. Extended reading, immersed in this dense hypnotic percussion, pulls me into an altered state. I've been trying to find a more literary way of because this book had quite a profound effect on me. I've been trying to find a better way to say this, but this is my experience, that it felt like somewhere between deep meditation and the beginning of a salvia trip. So I guess what I'm saying is strap in for...
I had hoped to do that quite dignified thing where you just get up and start reading, especially as the first poem I had planned to read is quite a sombre one, but that's not only a better introduction than I've ever had, that's a better bio than even I've written. I don't know how you have some of that information. I feel completely wrong-footed by my own bio. How do you know about salvia? Thank you. I'm just going to launch into the sombre poem, and we can pretend that didn't happen. Arterial. I'm only half surprised to find the heart stranded halfway down the M4. This is not, as you might think, a metaphor. The cat's eyes all join up, and there it is, red raw and chugging. The stereo's on the blink. So it's the racy roar of 80 miles an hour in the dark, and that hot, nagging tattoo. A doom drum counting down. 3 years ago I split the thing in two, left one half of it in town, lobbed the other out beyond the London orbital. Now here it is, jammed crudely back together, flashing red. Just like my mother always said, leave one man for another and you leave the better part of you. She knew a thing or two about the heart, its plush interiors, dim lit. The heart has 4 red rooms through which the blood is pushed in roughly rhythmic stops and starts. Think of the poor, dull traffic nudged from heart to brain to gut and back again. Once I read that the heart can only travel at walking pace, so it can't keep up this shuttle, shuttle. These are not helpful thoughts, said the therapist behind her wedded fingers. Also, we cannot treat you for a broken heart. I went away with sertraline instead, a little oil for a scrapped tin man. I'm counting down the junctions. All the while, that little tyrant's in his palanquin, drunk on his drum roll. You draw a broken heart with a cartoon fracture line, like the house built on a fault, walls gone, all rooms exposed. You can die of a broken heart, something to do with the vagus nerve and enough rancid adrenaline. At 80 miles an hour, I find it hard not to think of myself as a rope bag full of blood, thrown forward faster than it was meant to go. The ventricles, the veins and valves, the arteries, whose A is a rude mnemonic and also means away. Away we go, my tin can and my palanquin, my unhelpful thoughts, my little scrawl of blood. Anyway, I pulled off at Membry to write you this while the wipers beat their soft, half-hearted thud. That poem won a prize in Dublin, and it was played on the radio afterwards. And my mother listened to the broadcast, and she phoned me afterwards and said, "Abigail, is your car stereo really broken? What do you have to take care of anything?" And I said, that's your takeaway from that poem. and a conversation ensued about the things that we say in poems and the way in which they're perhaps not statements of fact, or the way in which they're all true, really. And after all the flash powder had dissipated, I thought, I'm not fluffing. Although, as it happens, my stereo really was broken. I'm going to be reading some poems from this, my book, Jinx. It's my first book, so every aspect of putting together a book, certainly from this end, has been completely new for me. No one told me about putting the best poem on the first page, for example. Now I know. I didn't realise there was this arcane system I was meant to be adhering to. But I obviously, all the sort of strangenesses of putting together a book I've experienced for the first time. And one of the strangest for me has been the way in which, when you put those together and bind them, you're forcibly confronted with, I want to say one's own themes, but that sounds very grandiose. What I really mean is one's own obsessions start to rise to the surface, and it's very interesting. And something I now realise is a ruling obsession, or at least has been over the 10 years or so I've been writing these poems, is the idea of disguise. Though I think I have quite a broad definition of what constitutes disguise. I would, for example, include wearing a suit to read some poems as a disguise. And I also think that the ways in which we put on disguises are many and much more varied than we care to admit. So that is a ruling theme of this book, and I suppose of something that concerns me continually. So for my first poem, I thought I would pick one that at least made this explicit. And in keeping with the idea of disguise, I've handed over to someone else. So it's addressed to someone from literature. It's addressed to Jane Austen's Emma. If you don't know Austen's Emma, she's someone who's a player of games, and in particular she's a matchmaker. She likes sort of getting her friends together. But because this is a Jane Austen novel, she ends up obviously played at her own game, and in fact she realises by the end of the novel that she's been in love with her best friend all along. There's an amazing, sorry I keep drifting away from the microphone, desperate for a glass of water, so I'm just going to have to shout. There's an amazing quote towards the end of the book that says, "Seldom, very seldom, does complete truth belong to any human disclosure." Emma, you're a gamer. Emma, you're a gamer. Backgammon, anagrams, the matches and the banter. You're a natural. Serve and volley back and forth in argument, the provocation, the resolve, those little zigzags of embarrassment, 100 different ways of being in love. Emma, you're a dreamer. You're a strategist, a schemer, the metagame of manners, all those formal misdemeanours, the compliments, charades. Emma, you're a charmer. You're a looper and a reeler. The surliest grammarian would melt to see you dance. Emma, you're a gamer. Who knows better than the dealer, the hazards and the chances, the advantage of a match, the rick-rack interlock of suit and fortune. Oh, Emma, it's a screamer. All the riddles, the enigmas, the courtship in a sonnet, the conundrums on the hill. Yes, he's frank, but is he candid? Someone blundered, someone's bluffing, and someone slipped a joker in the pack. The letters on the table rearranged to name your error. Emma, you're a goner. Don't you know you've met your match? Emma, that's amore. So it goes, same old story. The word you didn't know, the trick you had to miss. The hint that every night I sat and stared you in the face while you punted little sallies to and fro. Give it up now, little ego. There's a prize for second place. And Emma, you're an amateur. You're up against a pro. In keeping with the theme or the idea of disguise, one fault line I find particularly interesting is that between an actor and the roles they play. In part, at least, I suppose, because I think of that. I think that as something that we all do more or less in various different situations, and it's made explicit by actors and their roles. The actor Jeremy Brett became famous for playing the definitive Sherlock Holmes. That while he was playing Holmes, he became very ill and very obsessed with the character. Might be beginning to see why this was of interest to me. The obsession is always interesting, I think. But over his run, he started to refer to the character of Sherlock Holmes as you-know-who, and started, in some senses, to sort of act like Holmes or embody Holmes when he wasn't supposed to be playing him. And in fact became very ill and was confined for a while. But Brett said of the character, some actors fear if they play Sherlock Holmes for a very long run, the character will steal their soul, leave no corner for the original inhabitant. You know who. See how it glints and sparkles. Every good stone is a nucleus of crime, every facet a bloody deed. Oh yes, the hither-thither razor zips from crown to culet, quite so. But what may be said of the bullet which has struck the window frame just here? What of the extra glass and the shorn-off fire iron? The facts now, just the facts. We have a body and a murderer. Who then was our third drinker? Who is our guest who smokes without a holder, who paces as he waits and rubs his hands together? Whose is the greatcoat? Whose the bloody print on the newel post? Whose the multi-tool knife that nicked the bell rope? Who is this black streak, this jackal, this jewel thief? And who is it who coughs in the attic room? Let us fall back on the old axiom. But tell me, my dear Watson, who is this lean thing in the sanatorium with the door fastened from the inner side? Tell me the truth now. Do you not think it a most singular and whimsical conundrum? I keep in continue on a theme. I have a great love of horror movies from the 1940s and 50s, which is quite specific. But one of the reasons I love these films is that there was a great vogue for monster movies at the time. And to watch these films now, those monsters have lost the power to frighten us, and they've become something else instead. And what they've become is something quite unhappy, I think. They've also become very rich for overlaying one's own metaphors on top. One such film is The Creature from the Black Lagoon, which it contains a very famous scene in which the titular creature is swimming along like so, and above this the heroine of the movie is swimming on top. I was reminded of this particularly because I was lucky enough to see Kieran Berry read last night, and he has a poem featuring this scene in which he refers to it as the only memorable scene of the movie. I think that is probably fair, but I don't think that's the only interesting thing about the movie. One of the very interesting things about the film is this sort of tableau of the heroine swimming above and the creature swimming below. It's this fantastic, though quite crude metaphor, I suppose, for the sort of ego pootling along on the top and this sort of grotesque, monstrous id swimming underneath, which is rich stuff. And particularly because there's a character in the film, a bit part character who's there for a bit of comic relief called Lucas, who utters the line, "Even I, Lucas, have heard the legend of the man-fish." That's probably his most important contribution. But interestingly, his name, Lucas, means light. And I think there's a lot to be dug out of this sort of strange interplay in the film between sort of dual aspects of one's nature, if one is of a mind to find metaphors of that kind. So, Black Lagoon. But what did they tell you, Lucas? Out of the murk and mystery, was I all pleats and webbing, spats and pipes, my wet heart thrashing for lovely Julia Adams? I live here all alone. The water looks like screens look after everyone's gone home. Don't you know me, Lucas? Don't you recognise this place? That flare stick eye means nothing here. Your beacon name's a dud. Who's this who walks the bank? And who could say what backlit tricks the mirror plays with lights and camera muffled for the night? The Amazon chugs turpid gold and greens through California's glitz. Smiles, tinsel, yeses, fizz. The extras stick their tacky skin to plastic slats of loungers. Oh, Julie, Rita, Kay, each night in Phosphorine you loved the lot. Hot, pliant, all lit up like slot machines. Lucas, when they named you, did they say what drag lines ran below? What languid things resisted in the current? Oh, Lucas, did they say that each man has his double in the dark, and when I climbed aboard, what else was struggling upwards, gagging on the light? I'm going to read a poem that's a last-minute insertion, just because I'm very troubled by Jonathan's suggestion that animals don't do anything. As in my experience, they get up to all sorts of mischief. This poem is a conversation between a girl and a snake. On some occasions I've had some responses to this poem. I would ask you to bear in mind that sometimes a snake is just a snake. Delta snake. We're not supposed to parley, Roky Joe. I meant to close my eyes and shut the door. But you're a slender fellow, Ropey Joe, thin enough to slip beneath the door and spill your wicked do-si-do in curlicues and hoops across the floor. I'll be here, and I'm all ears. There are things I want to know. Tell me about absinthe and Yahtzee and sugar skulls and ginger and dynamite and hearsay and all the girls and boys who lost their way and the places in the woods we're not to go and all the games we're not allowed to play. There are so many things to know. My mother's got the supper on the go. My father will be sagging in his chair. But you're a speedy fellow, Ropey Joe, quick enough to slide behind his back, a wicked line of dominoes, zipping through the hall and up the stairs. Come on, pal, I'm ready now. There are things I want to know. Tell me about lightning and furies and ligatures and diamonds and zip wires and gooseberries and all the girls and boys who went astray and all the ones who never got to go and all the words we're not supposed to say. There are so many things to know. They told me you were trouble, Ropey Joe. You've always got to tip the apple cart. But you're a subtle fellow, Ropey Joe, suave enough to worm your way inside and pin your wicked mistletoe above the crooked lintels of my heart. Come on then, shimmy in. There are things I want to know. Tell me about hellhounds and rubies and pretty boys and bad girls and runaways and lost boys and all the things that made my mother cry and all the things he said to make her stay and all the things we're not allowed to say. There are so many things to know. I'm just going to read two more. One is, having said that I feel much more comfortable in disguise than I do in autobiography. I don't think it's any secret this is an almost straight-up autobiographical poem, and a comprehensive one at that, in that for the same amount of time that I was putting together the poems for this book, and actually much longer, I've been making a patchwork quilt. The reason I've been doing this is that I can't throw things away, and as I've been around for quite a long time now, I had to find a way of reducing the stuff I had, and so every item of clothing I've ever owned has been reduced to a patch and has been put into this quilt. However, after some years had elapsed, I started to view this quilt sort of, really as my life, as a representation of my life. And when I started to think about finishing it, I thought, you can't finish the quilt because you're going to die. So I wrote a poem instead, which is a brilliant way of sort of putting these in your glass zoo and not having to deal with them in real life. And the quilt's still unfinished, and probably always will be. So, the quilt. The quilt's a ragtag syzygy of everything I've been or done, a knotted spell in every seam, the stuff that pricks and pulls. The quilt began in '96. I scrapped the blotch batiks and brocatelles, each backward bending paisley hook that tied me to my town. The quilt came with me when I packed and left. A bad patch, that. You'll see I've sewn a worried blot of grey and black to mark a bruisey year. The quilt advances in a shop campaign through block fluorescent souvenirs of seedy clubs and bad side trance and peters out in blue. The quilt came with me when I ditched the scene and dressed myself as someone new, or someone else at any rate, and someone better too. I felt a charlatan in borrowed suits and flower prints and pastel hues, but things had turned respectable, and so I stitched that in. The quilt has tessellated all of it, arranged like faithful paladins, are half a dozen bits and scraps from those who took a turn, then split. The dapper one, the rugby fan, the one who liked his gabardine, the one who didn't want to be another patch in your fucking quilt, but got there all the same. The quilt is lined with all the bitter stuff I couldn't swallow at the time. The lemon yellow calico I never wore again, the guilt snuck into every thread of it and chafed all through the honeymoon. I scissored out the heart of it and stitched it, fixed it, final, here, with every other bright mistake I wear, like anyone. man. Bless you. It's probably really bad form to read one more poem after that, Andy. So and actually, it's 5-2. If we're going to answer any questions, we should. I'll wrap it up there. Thank you so much.
I want to talk to you about playfulness, because that's for me that's very much at the forefront of both of your work. I'm wondering, is that an intention you set? Is that something you cultivate in your writing, in your life? Is that something you think about?
Okay, straight this. Yeah, it's working. It's amazing. They always are. I think for me with playfulness, I think the thing is that a poem, before it tries to do anything else, needs to be a kind of form of self-entertainment for the writer. So for me, it's about being in a room and the poem kind of entertaining me before I even expect it to do anything else. And I think I don't know, poems are so abstract things. You're never quite sure whether a poem's working. You're never quite sure if it's going to go anywhere. I very much trust laughter. I trust laughter as a kind of bodily approval of the poem. That if a poem is making me laugh, or then something's happening which is kind of fun. But I think going into a room and the more pressure you put on yourself, the less chance you've got of doing something. So if it's just a form of entertaining yourself, then you'll get somewhere, I think.
I think that's quite right. I also would add to that so you mentioned, and it is true, that I taught circus skills for a very long time, and so something that any educationalist knows is that if you want to learn how to do something, the best thing you can say is, just play around with it to see what it does, and that applies to everything, including language. Language can be subjected to an awful lot of playing around to see what happens, and yes, I certainly do that. Most drafting for me certainly is riffing, is sort of funny little skirmishes around a word or a phrase to see what you can make happen. Yeah,
it's interesting that you linked that with the circus skills and kind of interesting how people's jobs come into their writing in sometimes obvious ways, sometimes subtle ways. Like, is there similarity in the problem-solving process of toy making and of poem making?
There's a degree of bloody-mindedness that comes into both. But certainly, in many ways, I regret giving up toy making, because there's a certain sort of fugue state that's really good for writing that I find it very hard to achieve now. But if you have to sit down over the course of a weekend and make 200 hula hoops, it's a simple repetitive action where your hands are occupied, and I find that having your hand, I always go on about having a manual skill is really good if you can for writing, because having your hands occupied in that way, it really frees up the higher functions to do what they do best. I have to drive places now if I want to do that. I just sit there with my hands on the wheel and obviously focus, but you really don't. Driving doesn't require your full focus. So yes, yes, that's the end of. Just stop talking, Abigail.
Do you have a process or a method for getting to that sort of focus and attention, and is there anything that's rituals or anything like
that? Rituals, yeah. I mean, I think I don't know. I sort of feel as though you're sort of asking what do I do in order to make a poem work? That's the sort of question.
I guess, or to begin or to get into the headspace. Do you have trouble? Do you ever not want to write, or?
I think for me, poems are sort of miraculous, like when they occur, because they almost never do. And my way of dealing with it, the anxiety that generates, because it's like the most important thing in your life, but you also don't know when or if the next poem will come. You know, it's a terrible, miserable sort of existence. The way that I deal with that anxiety is simply to work my arse off at it, you know. And so how do you get into the headspace? Well, on the whole, you might not. So you simply work and work and work, and then you cream off the best stuff and you ignore the stuff that didn't work. I mean, that's it for me. I don't recommend this as a course of action or a way of living, but it is my approach, I think. Yeah.
We've got a couple of minutes, so just a kind of quick fire question. Do you know the first time or one of the first times that language really set you alight, that it did something to you? Do you have a memory of something like that? Both of you.
So I grew up in a very large household, and the people in my family had a really amazing collective memory for sort of ditties and scraps of not particularly literary poems, but certainly rhymes, song lyrics, word games and stuff like that. So there was a lot of that at home. And I went to a Catholic school, so there was a lot of opportunity to recite stuff as well. So certainly rhythm rather than words per se were there from a very young age. I don't know how it was for you.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It's the language of childhood, isn't it? You know, the language of the nonsense language of childhood. And it's also familial. I think it's your parents' use of language. So. My mother, when I was a kid, would call me Johnny Backin, and Backin means small one, but not in any way that I understood at the time. It was just a word which sounds like fabulous, but it's also kind of about affection and love. So I think it's that kind of that language that you can't make sense of, that's beyond you, you know, which is kind of nonsensical in some way. And I think that probably goes back to your first question about playfulness in language. You know, I think it's partly about trying to rediscover that element of language. I think for me, I mean, later on, I can remember very clearly doing the R.S. Thomas poem, The Village, in school, and that for me was like the first time, well, okay, poetry is actually about the place where I'm from and written out of an experience which is a bit like mine, and that because before then poetry was written by people a long way away, you know, and about something else. So that was a really, really important poem for me.
Thank you both very much. So I just want to say that both of your books are out there for sale, and I just want to thank you both again for sharing your work with us.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.